This segment is brought to you by Aimpoint.
Hey gang, Larry Vickers here. I got a training tip for you presented by Aimpoint. And I'm gonna run through some of my lessons learned using and teaching students with Aimpoint Red Dot Sights. All right, now I have patrol rifle optic here. We're gonna talk a little bit about this and some of the finer points on that. And we're gonna also talk about mounting this Comp M5, which has the factory throw lever Aimpoint LRP mount. All right, now, I like to center my red dot sight right over the mag well. Theory behind that is, if the optic is closer to your eye, you have better field of view through the optic, but less field of view around it. If it's farther forward, it's exactly the opposite. You have less field of view through the optic, more field of view around it. Also, as a general rule of thumb with an AR, in particularly 5.56 AR, you want to try to mount the optic on the upper receiver and not the rail system. You don't want to count on the rail system staying snug in order to maintain zero with your Aimpoint Red Dot Sight. Okay, I take my Comp M5, I center it above the magazine well. I want to find the notch on the Picatinny rail. Now the throw lever, you want to tension this adjustment nut to where the throw lever starts to get tight at about a 45-degree angle. 90 degrees straight to the side, 0 degrees straight back. About 45 degrees, you want it getting snug and starting to clamp down to the pick rail on top of the upper receiver. Cinch it all the way down and snap it down in, make sure everything's good to go. Once you've got the tension where it needs to be, good idea, take a paint pen. I have a silver Sharpie here, and I want to use that groove on this particular mount as my index point, and on the mount itself, I want to come down and put a little paint mark. Something you're going to be able to see. Now, remember, as you use the weapon, you get solvent on it, oil, that paint mark's going to come off, but you got to keep an eye on it. That's your visual indicator at a glance that that tension nut is still tight. Also, the front and rear lens covers, I like to spin them around so when they're deployed, they pop down and lay against the rail like that. Now, one thing you need to remember as you use these Aimpoint Red Dot Sights, some of them like to spin easily. You may have to put a little bit of glue or something on there to keep that thing from spinning, but I like to have them where they lay against the rail instead of being flopped up where they interfere with your field of view. Also, when you're zeroing an Aimpoint Red Dot Sight, you want to focus on the dot and think of it as a scope crosshair. When you're using the gun fast for fast shots, you can keep your focus on the target and just superimpose the red dot where you want it to go. Zeroing, totally different animal. Now, patrol rifle optic with the mount. Couple things. Notice this comes from the factory already mounted and cinched down. Not a bad idea to just double check them to make sure the elevation adjustment is exactly at 12 o'clock and the windage adjustment is exactly at 3 o'clock. All right. If you are mounting your own patrol rifle optic or M68 combat optic in your own mount, you want to make sure you always keep the elevation right at 12 o'clock and the windage right at 3 o'clock. That way, when you make your adjustments, the adjustment is running true, straight up and left and right. Okay, Aimpoint battery life. Aimpoint is world famous for their battery life, and in many cases, constant on, they'll last 4 or 5 years. My personal rule of thumb, real simple. Every New Year's, any particular rifle that I am using where I have the Aimpoint constant on, I just switch the battery out. It's probably overkill, but I think running the thing constant on for a full year is fine by me. Now, what intensity do you use? You want to set the intensity so if you pick that thing up at night in a lighted environment, you can see the dot. If you set it for low light conditions and you dim the dot way down, if you go outside during daylight or the lights on inside your house, oftentimes the dot is going to be too dim. You're better off with a dot you can see in bright lighting conditions, and it may be a bit too bright in low light versus the other way around. hope you enjoyed this training tip on how to best use your optic, brought to you by Aimpoint. Have a good one.